Everyone thinks my bike looks like a piece of old crap, but they'll see. Don't judge a book by its cover, you know? That's what I say.
I honestly didn't think this would become a video. I thought I was just taking a break from work with this fun new travel show in which actor Ewan McGregor and his buddy Charlie Boorman go on a motorcycle road trip across Europe.
There they are, look, here's our first windmills.
Oh yeah, oh my god. Wow.
It was actually a legacy sequel of sorts, because they also did a trip like this, a much bigger one even, all the way back in 2004, which I hadn't seen yet.
You know, we've had rain, we've had mud, we've had rivers, we've had turned over cars, we've had everything.
And so in between the weekly releases of each episode of this new season, I checked out the first adventure as well. And what I discovered will blow your mind. Well, maybe it's not as dramatic as that, but still, there was something about watching these two journeys that happened 20 years apart, side by side like this, that was quietly profound. And I think it's because in the timing of these two seasons, they sort of accidentally captured a major transition period in our society. One that isn't just defined by technological changes, not even just by cultural shifts or the rise of social media, but rather by something deeper, like some kind of spiritual reconfiguration in our relation to the world and in how we move through it. One that seems like it's rapidly eroding so much of what used to make traveling and just being in the world so meaningful. It's something that I'd already been feeling kind of intuitively and somewhat pessimistically for a while now, as I'm sure many others have as well. And yet, I don't think I'd ever seen the contrast between then and now as clearly and as insightfully as I did while watching this show. And more than that, nor had I ever encountered a travelogue as surprisingly uplifting and transformative as this one.
I don't know, it's a big heavy bike, I've never really done it before.
First, let's wind back the clock. The year is 1997. Ewan McGregor stars in a movie where he meets Charlie Boorman, and soon enough a lifelong friendship is born. Part of the reason why they hit it off so well is because they both share a passion for motorcycles.
It smells really nice too.
And so naturally the idea of going on a trip together became inevitable.
We always talked about doing a trip together.
Maybe to Spain or somewhere like that.
But what initially started as a simple holiday eventually snowballed into a much greater ambition: to travel from London all the way to New York by going east across the Eurasian continent, and to document the whole adventure with a professional film crew.
The idea of filming it in the first place was to have a record of it, firstly.
And long story short, in 2004, this is exactly what they did. After weeks of preparation and training, they set out on their bikes, together with their cameraman Claudio, who would be riding with them on his own motorcycle, and with a small support crew of 2 vehicles that followed them from a distance, and that they would occasionally link up with at border crossings and other critical moments.
A holiday doesn't have to be lying on a beach, you know. It can be exploration and adventure.
Over the next 3.5 months, they would travel about 31,000 kilometers, or 19,000 miles, across 12 different countries in Europe, Asia, and North America.
Sand and mud today. I feel really, really far away from home now. That's suddenly much further than I did yesterday, you know.
The document of their adventure released later that same year, in the fall of 2004, as the television show Long Way Round. For context, just in case 2004 doesn't feel that long ago to you, this is when we were still 1 year away from the first ever YouTube video, 2 years away from the first digital GoPro camera, and 3 years away from the first iPhone. In this sense, Long Way Round might just be one of the last documented analog adventures, one of the last portraits of a world that was right on the precipice of changing forever.
Bye-bye guys! See you in New York!
Actually, I should mention they did make another season soon after the first one, which I would consider as still existing in the same historical space.
When we first met up in London after hadn't seen each other for a little while, we started talking about Africa.
Long Way Down, as it was called, took place in 2007, which was still about a month before the first iPhone came out, and 3 years before people would first begin posting travel pics on Instagram. In this season, Ewan and Charlie rode from Scotland down into the African continent, all the way to Cape Town in South Africa.
Our first African camp, Charlie.
And so technically speaking, what we have are 2 documents of what I guess can be called the before time. And to see clearly what exactly has changed since, what exactly defines the transition period that followed soon after. This is where we jump to the next time that Ewan and Charlie got back together on the road again, which wouldn't be until our current decade.
I'm dying to get out there. I want to be on a trip again.
Here again, we technically have 2 new seasons. First, there's Long Way Up from 2020, in which they traveled from the southern tip of Argentina up to Los Angeles in the United States.
And we've got just 3 months to do it.
There's a lot to do.
And then there's Long Way Home, the new 2025 release where they make a round trip across Europe.
It's funny, isn't it? 20 years this year of doing this. That's bizarre, isn't it?
So to get the obvious evolution out of the way, let's briefly talk about the visual presentation.
So you got the shot of you riding the bike, the shot looking forward, and the shot from your lid. Is that right?
It's kind of funny how you wouldn't include this now, and in fact the new seasons don't even really bother to. But in the first 2 journeys they spend a whole episode on the preparation, in which they cover, among other things, the process of actually documenting the trip.
We want to film this, but we don't want to be surrounded by loads of cameramen, so we're just trying to figure out the best way to do it.
I think you've... So ease back. Could you just ease back a bit further? There we go. Perfect.
They talk about using state-of-the-art helmet cameras, they explain the need for these cases upon cases of additional filmmaking equipment, and just reflect on the general challenges of documenting an adventure of this size.
We're taking so much camera equipment on this trip that we decided to take 2 camera vehicles.
Can you see me now?
Today, interestingly enough, it's not so much that the visual language has actually changed all that much. I mean, sure, the image quality got a lot better and they added a drone to their repertoire, which they didn't have before. But other than that, the show looks pretty much the same. It's still a mix of second unit establishing shots, footage filmed by cameraman Claudio, footage filmed with Ewan and Charlie's helmet cameras, and moments taken from the video diaries which Ewan and Charlie kept along the way.
Have you been keeping a diary?
No. Have you?
The real difference then is more about the way this visual language has become so commonplace now, how it has become democratized.
They must have made a James Bond film here, surely. We've got a tunnel and James Bond and all of this, look.
Now of course all that pro gear of yesteryear exists as typical consumer products. Action cameras, pocket cameras, phone cameras, cinema cameras, camera drones. All of these have become the standard toolkit not just of professional travel shows, but also of individual creators, of solo travelers, Instagram influencers, hobby cinematographers, and just everyday folks making personal holiday videos, a group that I would also include myself in. I've been fortunate enough to have taken some bigger trips, including an amazing honeymoon to New Zealand, which had been on my bucket list ever since I first saw The Lord of the Rings as a 10-year-old. And even though these videos are just part of my private memories, I still liked the idea of also creating something that may as well have been a travel show. And although I'm by no means an expert cinematographer, I do think I got some pretty good looking footage here and there. But anyways, the point is that nowadays the technology itself is no longer really an obstacle. Pretty much anyone, anywhere can now go out and capture what they encounter in clear images and great detail. And more importantly, they can now share it online for the whole world to see. And this brings us to what might just be the real defining feature of this transition period, which, contrary to what you might be thinking right now, is not so much about the rise of the internet and of social media per se, but more so about its second-order effect, which is that in this overwhelming flood of images, videos and documents, in this rapid digital charting of the world around us, it feels like we've accidentally killed the meaning of an adventure.
I felt like some great explorer. We were really riding our bikes out into nowhere.
While watching the first 2 seasons, there was one thing in particular that really struck me, which was the palpable feeling of distance in every meaning of the word.
Now, look, there's absolutely nothing that way. Absolutely nothing that way.
The roads were long, the terrain a continuous challenge, and traversing it felt impactful. It felt risky even, in a way one would expect when venturing so deep into the unknown.
So sticky and so slippy.
Are you okay? Look at this place.
I remember especially this part where they were traveling down the Road of Bones in Far East Russia, a long Soviet-era highway that has largely fallen into disrepair.
There's been a mounting sense of fear about the whole thing.
Despite having received warnings from the locals, they went ahead anyways and soon encountered broken down bridges and whole sections of the road that were reclaimed by rivers.
The roads just deteriorated and deteriorated. It was just everything thrown at us at once. You never ride across that, it's far too deep. Current's too strong.
They were lucky to encounter some big rigged trucks, which were the only vehicles to occasionally traverse this coast highway, and in hindsight clearly the only ones capable of doing so. But even then, pulling the support vehicles through the rapid currents was a seriously nerve-wracking ordeal, with a density that rivaled even the most thrilling Hollywood productions. And it wasn't just because of the immediate dangers, the risk of getting stuck, of losing their equipment and so on, but also because you knew that all this was taking place at the absolute pinnacle of their sort of psychological or sociological distance as well.
That's no good, that's no good, that's no good.
At this point in the journey, they were hundreds of kilometers into what is essentially no man's land, thousands of kilometers removed from home. They were in a place they had barely ever seen images of, had no idea what the landscape ahead would look like. What they did know was that there was no AAA service here, no one to call, no Reddit forums to ask questions in. The people they did encounter were few, and none spoke their language. Again, in every sense of the word, they were truly distanced from the world they knew.
We got to a point where we couldn't ride any further. This bit's beat us, actually.
Now, obviously they were never going to recreate this particular kind of excitement driving around Europe in 2025. But even in the 2020 season, where they crossed the whole of the South American continent, that impact of distance also felt strangely different. And this wasn't because they didn't venture into faraway, difficult to traverse places, because they did.
You okay? You alright?
Good, I'm fine.
No, it was because of a change in that other form of distance. Let's call it symbolical distance. That one that is only experienced when you're far removed from the world you know in those more psychological, social and linguistic terms. When you've truly ventured into what to you is uncharted land, into those faraway places of which you have little preconceived notions, few clear images, and limited tools by which to traverse them. Because nowadays that just doesn't really happen anymore, does it? There's a small moment in the South America trip where Ewan, thousands of kilometers away from home, casually records a foreign language with his phone, which feeds it right back to him in plain English.
Together with my husband, they undertook a family project to sell meals.
And it just feels so indicative of how our interaction with the world, at least in relation to travel, has become so different now. Language barriers are easily overcome with translation apps. Every phone is also a GPS that lets us navigate even the most remote places with relative ease. Social media and Google reviews guide us in where to go and what to do, and all the while we remain tethered to the place we left, to our everyday concerns, connections, and distractions. It's like the world's distant frontiers have been digitally domesticated, its once adventurous essence now made convenient and familiar. It's a fundamental transformation not just of how we travel, but also of what it means to travel in the first place. Because perhaps most importantly, what all this has resulted in is that we transitioned from a world of imagination to one that feels like it's been entirely encapsulated within our symbolic field. One in which the once blank spaces of curiosity have been completely inundated with images.
Machu Picchu Day. Oh, and there it is. I gotta turn the camera.
Seeing Ewan and Charlie visit the great lost city of the Incas, for example, feels entirely different now because you've probably already seen the exact same pictures of it 1,000 times already on Instagram Reels, YouTube videos and friends' photos. Your symbolic distance from the place has already been significantly diminished. And while you would think this would make the act of traveling somewhat redundant, clearly it has actually had the opposite effect. It actually created a new and much more expansive travel culture, one that also signifies a more fundamental shift in how we interact with the world. It's a culture that's no longer really defined by discovery or by adventure, but rather by consumption.
Oh goodness, this wasn't quite the experience I was expecting to have up here, oh well.
Today, it feels like we no longer travel into the unknown as much as we are trying to actualize a pre-existing mental image of it. Or to put it like this, the foreign is no longer just a fascination, it has also become a commodity. It has become a product to be selected and purchased. One that we might even feel socially pressured to consume as part of our personal identity projects. You know, as a form of social capital. After all, in an increasingly individualized world, we desire unique experiences so that we can stand out as unique individuals. And we better get them fast, for the supply, it seems, is limited. We all know that the classical tourist destinations have long since been overrun. You don't want to be found at the Trevi Fountain or in Santorini no more. No, the name of the game is authenticity now. It's about seeking out the hidden gems, the undiscovered secrets, and all the come here now while it is still pure type of places. In this sense, it kind of feels like what we're really after is exactly that lost sense of adventure, to find some place that hasn't yet been enveloped by the world we left. Find some image that hasn't yet been rendered profane. But of course the ironic tragedy here is that with each place we uncover, each place we visit while it is still pure, we contribute to its loss of that special status. And indeed, more often than not, the authenticity we believe to have found turns out to have already been folded into the mold anyways. That rundown barn in the Alps where your grandfather once slept in exchange for a good conversation is now an expensive Airbnb experience. A rare find though. Key is in the lockbox. Your local guide in Vietnam is on Instagram and logged into the same Twitter discourse as you are. And no matter where you go, it feels like it's always the same candy bar wrappers and half-empty fast food bags that are littering the landscape. All of this, of course, is part of a much wider process of globalization, of the more general homogenization of culture that has been going on since long before Ewan and Charlie set out on their first adventure. And yet, I can't help but feel like these last 2 decades or so have nevertheless formed a significant escalation of whatever was already going on before. It's like we all have this subconscious feeling that we're running out of something important, and it's put us in this desperate frenzy to grab what little we can before nothing is left.
Okay, let's do it.
Alright, here we go, another day. I feel like my bike is so noisy. Wish it was a bit quieter.
With all this in mind, I was initially watching Ewan and Charlie's latest season with some cynicism, watching it as a leisurely trip that, while still being fun enough, was ultimately little more than an impression of the true adventures they had 20 years earlier.
Poppies!
Wow, beautiful poppy field, holy moly.
To add to the nostalgia, they even chose to ride vintage motorcycles this season, as if they figured that if the road itself wasn't gonna give them any troubles, they might as well create some drama by hopping on bikes that were sure to break down at some point.
Give it a wiggle, mate, give it a wiggle. Yeah. Oh! Your fingers okay?
Yep.
But as I got deeper into the season, that initial feeling actually started to change. Instead of finding merely a lamentation for what was lost, surprisingly enough, I also ended up finding an inspiration for what can still be regained.
Oh man, the idea of riding the bike to your house, so exciting.
For while the journey itself was far less ambitious this time around, just exploring their own backyard, as they put it, they did still bring with them that same adventurous spirit that also propelled them across the world all those years ago.
It is such a beautiful part of the world, Austria. I love it.
And especially in today's consumerist travel culture, that actually felt kind of revelatory. Because as they were making their way through Europe and traversing its many back roads, small towns and local traditions, what they demonstrated was not just the idea that there's always more to discover even in the places that you consider close to home and already familiar, but more importantly, it was a reminder that traveling is not really an act of geographical movement or an experience to consume. Rather, it's a mode of being, it's an attitude. It's a purposeful relinquishing of the everyday to open yourself up to the unknown and the unfamiliar. It's the feeling of looking at the horizon and wondering what's beyond. It's to follow nothing other than your own curiosity, to temporarily disconnect yourself, run wild, and be free.
You have to be open to the journey.
Ooh, look at this.
Very pretty though, beautiful.
Look, we all know the saying, it's the journey, not the destination, and yet, despite being a tired cliché, it still feels like we've forgotten the truth which it represents. We're flying more often and further away than we ever did in the past. We follow where the cloud has already been, jumping into supposedly authentic experiences that in reality have already been pre-curated. We are essentially skipping the journey for the destination.
Charlie. Huh? Cobblers.
Part of what made those original seasons so adventurous was exactly because of how distance, both in physical and symbolical terms, accumulated slowly between the travelers and their home, with every new destination becoming more impactful precisely because you could feel the growing weight of the journey that preceded it.
We've come this far and people's faces have changed and people's houses have changed and people's beliefs may have changed.
And while it's not pushed to the extreme lengths as it was in the past, it is still there in the new season too. It still shows how there's a wholly different experience that opens up when you're not just taking that cheap 90-minute flight to your destination, but instead dedicate yourself to feeling every inch of ground that leads towards it, to witness all the in-between spaces that you would have skipped over otherwise, and in that process, to imprint on your psyche a real measure of distance. This is also why Ewan and Charlie drive on motorcycles. It's because, as they repeat throughout each adventure, it allows them to feel the earth vibrating beneath them, the air flowing around them. It's because it makes them feel connected to the world they're traveling through, which in turn renders their experience more immediate and impactful.
It becomes another central experience as you ride along.
You said something yesterday when you said it's sort of humbling, and I think it's true. It sort of puts you in touch with yourself in the world in a way, when you realize it's the beauty of it and the vastness of it.
And that's something you just don't get when you step out of that airplane all hazy and disoriented. In fact, from this perspective, the notion of jet lag is not just your body adjusting to a rapid shift in time zones. It's a moral punishment for having cheated distance. Now, of course, I'm being a little dramatic here. Obviously, if it's been your lifelong dream to travel somewhere far that is only doable by airplane, then by all means, go for it. I did, more than once even. But still, I did feel it was important to talk about this, because all this stuff is not just about traveling itself. It's not about where you're going or about how you get there. No, rather, it's about our longing to experience something that we so easily forget otherwise, that so easily slips away in our day-to-day existence.
It just became really apparent that this journey should be shared with, with him.
The actual reason why there was such a long gap in between the first and later seasons is because for both Ewan and Charlie, life simply got in the way. Ewan had his career in Los Angeles, Charlie had his in England, and the two just lost touch for a while. That is, until Charlie got into a serious motorcycle accident that he was very lucky to survive.
How is Charlie, Ollie?
Can't breathe properly.
I woke up in intensive care and I'd had a massive brain injury.
I got a text saying that he'd had a horrendous motorcycle accident.
And I broke my pelvis, the ribs were smashed, collarbone was broken. Other people want to run again or do whatever, but I wanted to get myself better enough to get back on a motorbike.
In the aftermath, the two men reconnected again, as if being suddenly reminded of what truly mattered to them.
I was reaching out to him more and, keeping in touch about his rehab.
And soon enough, they were back on their bikes again.
Whew. Here we are, number 4. Long way 4.
Now, Charlie had recovered as well as he could, but physically he hasn't been the same, which is part of why the newer seasons don't feel quite as dangerous as the older ones.
I'll get my scooter.
But then again, it was actually kind of endearing to see Ewan being so concerned about his friend's safety.
Are you okay? Have you hurt yourself?
It's fine, I think I'm okay. Yeah, I can breathe.
Also, we should take into account here that, since their first adventure, both men have aged with more than 20 years by now.
We've all got older.
You don't look a day older.
No, thank you, don't feel it.
In this sense, the transition period that feels so poignant in between their first and last adventure isn't just defined by a societal shift, but also by a much more personal one. The transition from a life that's staring wide-eyed into the future to one that's already begun to look back, that's really starting to feel the weight of time.
I'm sure it's going to be an emotional moment.
A day of memories today, really.
At one point during their 2025 trip across Europe, they passed the same road that they also traveled on during the first season all the way back in 2004, and visit the same place where they also stood as younger men.
20 years ago we looked down this hole, Charlie, and here we are again. None the wiser.
Oh my God.
This is going to be the cruel cut back and forth between us 20 years ago and now.
Oh, I dropped it. Sorry, good luck with that.
And I found this to be a surprisingly moving moment, because as they were reminiscing about their past experiences from when they were still in their early 30s, roughly the same age that I am right now, I just couldn't help but imagine myself in their place, couldn't help but wonder what stories I'll be recounting 2 decades from now, what present experiences will stay with me in the years to come, and what friendships will define me for the rest of my days.
I'm so glad that we're still knocking around to the world on bikes.
It made me realize that in between these contrasting seasons, in between the analog era and the digital age, the daring expedition and the leisurely trip, what I saw above all else, and what probably got me hooked on the show to begin with, was the way it captured a deep and genuine yearning for life, a longing to have those meaningful experiences, to make those connections, and to just be amazed and surprised and nurtured by the world and the people around us.
There's something very attractive about being on the road. You know, you yearn for adventure and not knowing what comes ahead.
In this sense, an adventure is even more than a mode of being, more than a momentary escape from the everyday. It's a creator of stories, a forger of bonds, or to repurpose another cliché, it's the friends we made along the way.
Being on the road with Charlie is something that I share with him and no one else, He's in my mirror or I'm in his. It's so familiar. We've done so many thousands of miles like that,
I think as you get older, you're much more precious with the people that you spend time with. And Ewan is one of those people. I wasn't really going anywhere until we did Long Way Round. So I feel very grateful that I met Ewan.
It's been amazing.
It has. Thank you, Ewan. It's been great fun.
Thank you, man.
By now, it's been a few months since I've watched the show, and already I've felt a significant shift in my own desire for traveling and exploration. Felt a desire to slow things down, to focus less on chasing manufactured consumerist desires, and more on just being out there with the people I care about. But then again, more than merely changing our own attitude and finding refuge in our own little bubble of experience, I think it is also important to acknowledge that the world is changing around us, that there is a real vulnerability to exactly those pristine places we love to journey into, and that we ourselves therefore play a significant role in deciding their fate in one way or another. This is something that Ewan and Charlie also make a point of, as in each season they make an active effort to contribute to some greater good beyond their own adventure, and to leave each place a little better than they found it. And in that spirit, I wanted to do the same. I wanted to make this video not just to generate personal insight, but also to inspire actual material change. Which is why I was so happy to once again be able to partner up with the amazing community-funded organization that is protecting biodiversity around the globe, the nature protection organization Planet Wild. Through a global community of nature enthusiasts who care deeply about the natural world, Planet Wild is engaged in a wide variety of conservation projects. Every month, the community funds a new project partner to protect animals, forests and oceans, and each project is documented and can be viewed on their YouTube channel, which is not just a great way to see what your contribution helped achieve, but which is also genuinely inspiring as it demonstrates how simple local initiatives can actually make a huge difference. Such as this project where they are helping to protect one of Europe's last ancient forests. Which is one that is especially close to my heart, as I'd love to explore more of my own continent and have actually been planning a road trip across the Balkan countries where much of that last remaining wilderness is located. Planet Wild is basically crowdfunding for nature, which I think is a great way to help from a distance. If you'd like to support their efforts, you can become a member right now through a monthly contribution of your own choosing. Big or small, whatever feels right. You can start for as little as the price of a coffee, and you can cancel anytime. If you join through my personal link, this QR code, or by using the code STORIES210, then I'll make sure that the first 100 people to sign up will get their first month paid for by me. You'll immediately start making a difference for ourselves and for the future, and you'll become part of a global conservative community dedicated to preserving nature and maintaining the world's sacred wilderness. If you want to see Planet Wild in action, you can watch their video on protecting Europe's ancient forests here.